Hello, happy Friday. I got access to an early version of EU5 in order to make a video, but keep in mind it will be an early version, so there will be bugs and issues. I have 30 minutes, we're going to talk about economics. To start, the basis of all economics here in EU5 is going to be goods, of which there are an enormous amount. They have not just a base price value, but a price that is manipulated by supply and demand, which is going to function a lot of the interesting relationships for the game. These are going to be contained within your own market. However, on a broader scale, you can influence other markets through trade, and this is going to be an enormous source of value. Goods can be produced in one of two ways. There can be RGOs, or resource gathering operations, which will get the base level goods, and then there can also be buildings which will use PMs, or production methods, in order to produce stuff using the inputs gathered through RGOs or from other buildings. Your two main sources of income are taxing the estates, whose value is determined by the sell prices of all the buildings in the RGOs, and trade, which is determined between the difference between one market's price and another market's price, less the trade expenses of running the buildings that facilitate trade. The two main negative downward pressures on the economy are going to be control, which is a multiplier for how much value you get out of a location to the tax base. This is an anti-blobbing mechanic, and market access, where the amount of goods that you produce in a location is multiplied by the degree to which it has a greater access to the market. Strategically speaking, most of what we'll be doing is focusing on trying to have as much control as possible in the territories we own. Let's take a look at our unique situation in here in Korea so that we can formulate a bit of a strategy. Now, if we look at our resources, we have a lot of gold, we have gems, we have pepper, and we also have silver. All of these export really well, and so you can see we're already making a ton of money through trade. We are going to look to push these specifically, as well as push trade, and also be a little bit more backward with the economics, specifically leaning on resources rather than production. Longer term, we need to think about our kind of geographic situation and also our vegetative situation. Geographically, we have a lot of hills and mountains, which kind of comes with the territory as it relates to some of these better resources, but the flatlands are going to be where we make our bigger cities, or are going to be very nice for big cities, and also anywhere on the coast, so we will have a nice power base here. Also, we can propagate control through the waterways eventually, so ideally, we'd like to make a power base here in the bay as best we can, and also look to push things. Now, coming in and looking at the vegetation, you can see we have some farmlands here. We'd love to push up into here, and also there is a little bit down here and down here in terms of grasslands and open areas we can look to control. We also have an enormous population in the bottom right corner. The river map mode takes forever to load, so we won't show it, but there's a river that goes through here, and there's a river that goes through here. A long-term strategic plan is going to be making a river canal system through to this top right corner so that we can propagate control along the coast up here, and also one down here so that we can propagate some control down into the right where we have this major population center and make use of those pops. In addition to control, some other things we are going to track are going to be our literacy rate, also our overall level of development, and finally, and probably most importantly, our level of urbanization. Here are our estates. Pause if you want to read. Building all those expensive resources with marketplaces at the outskirts, because these are not dependent on control, and then everything that we need to have close to the capital, like the masons, we are putting close to the capital. Masonry is going to be important because if we can collapse the price on that, we can get a hefty discount on buildings, and we are going to do that for most buildings, even the ones that require more complex goods. We first collapse the price of the inputs, and then we invest in a massive wave of buildings. We also pick up our first law. Pause if you want to read our other ones. Lack of qualified individuals, in this case laborers, is one of the reasons we can't just keep pushing these resources up to their very cap. We use our cabinet here to encourage migration. Part of our long-term plan, we need a string of cities with 25,000 pops. So for our parliamentary debates, generally we're going to want either conduct a census, because that's a lot of pop growth, or expand gravel road network. For now, this will be good for us because roads will be very good and very cheap for us right now, but it's more about progressing towards a centralization. If you want to see the values we want to trend towards, feel free to pause. Here is updated control around the capital after building some roads into it. At the start of every age, you will get the choice between three focuses, which will change your tech tree. We're going to go with administrative, and this is a feature I rather like here in EU5, is every playthrough can be customizable. You're going to choose what tech you get. You can only get around 50 to 75% per age, and so by choosing which techs you want to get, you are going to shape your country not just for that given age, but for all ages to come, as you will keep and retain these bonuses. We wait until we collapse the price and then take loans to upgrade 7 towns at once, which is going to give us more control and allow us to build newer types of buildings, more of the production-oriented buildings. Generally speaking, when evaluating this, you want to not build over good resources or bad terrain or vegetation, but in this case, it all works for us to just be building around the capital, where we have a lot of control and market access. We start to build some roads connecting the very best resources like gold and gems to the capital that are nearby to give us more control, to give us more output. So we've hit a bit of an inflection point where we have a robust enough economy that we can start going for buildings that don't really benefit the economy, but instead benefit the nation, like the Confucian School, which is unique to the Koreans. We've already collapsed the price, so we're going to spam them everywhere. If we look at our economy, we're still wildly profitable per trade power on all of our trades, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. To move and look at the balance, we are making 400 in trade, less than 140 in trade expense, and we're making a little bit of money in the taxes. What I'm trying to say is the economy's going really well. I hope nothing bad happens. So the Black Plague hits. Hopefully it doesn't kill too many of our pops. So 1.2 million of our 3 million pops died of the plague, but at least little Timmy's gonna make it home for Christmas. I'm being told little Timmy's not gonna make it home for Christmas. Overall, this is kind of 40% of the pops is relatively good performance. We're not sure the best strategy on this yet, but in order to rebuild, we are building settlements everywhere. The depopulated areas allow us to build settlements, and this has a ton of population growth. Also, in a ton of our areas, the qualified people are dead, so it's going to take a while to recover, and even if we build more buildings, it won't do anything. If we add cotton here, there's still not enough workers to work everything. Following the Black Death, we did a massive rebuild project, putting in a bunch of bridges, roads, and things that employ people that weren't burghers or laborers because they were all dead, stuff like schools as well as temples. We took on a massive amount of debt in order to do this, knowing we would spike prices for some time. We also converted a bunch of towns to cities, settlements to towns, and we are looking to make sure that they are never idle. So here is also our current level of urbanization, which is quite a big come up. Also very notable is we did add a city. This is going to be the future capital here and is quite a bit more expensive. So things are coming quite along. And in terms of our decision making, we are starting to draw a path towards the 2 canals we want because the towns will grow a little bit better in population. So we're setting ourselves up for that. We annex our northern neighbor here. With this, we gain an additional economic challenge / opportunity, which is now we have 2 markets, which adds a layer of complexity. Before we were just collapsing prices in Kaesong. Now we need to collapse prices in Liaoyang if we want to build within that market. But we have a new opportunity in the sense, and this might be something that's very powerful, that we have market access in yet another spot spawning it, so we have opportunities for profitable buildings if we can manage prices. So both dock and bark are going to be some critical techs for us to acquire here in order to integrate these newly acquired territories and properly spread control to them. This is the current sad state of affairs when it comes to maritime control over our waters. This is the proximity map mode, which shows how much logistical power is spent to travel 1 unit within your empire. Currently, to travel one of these sea segments, we're spending around 31. We can get that down to about 3 with enough maritime presence and other modifiers. Here's an updated look at development. You can see that the mountains, which have a negative modifier for development, are starting to show through on our development map mode. And here's a look at literacy, where you can see all the infrastructure we have been building. The civilian infrastructure is making a big difference. Largely because it's a better natural harbor, which will let us disembark for cheaper. We move both the capital and market center to Inju, and we can start building some capital buildings we've been holding off on. So just by getting a tiny bit of merchant marine and building docks between both of the capital and this little peninsula, we've reduced the distance of the segment from 30 to 13. So we upgrade 14 settlements up into towns, so urbanizing quite a bit here, and also this town into a city. We do need to make a line of cities, and to that end, we are still promoting migration along this line. We need to get each of these settlements / towns up to 25k pop before we can upgrade it to a city, giving us powerful bonuses from it being a city, but more importantly, lets us build a specific building. We are going to add a couple slaver buildings, which, given, Korea's history with slavery, is RP, but more importantly, it's going to allow us to send people to the frigid north, where they understandably don't really want to go and work. This is the building we were referring to earlier, the Pound Lock Canal, which reduces the distance cost to capital. If you stack enough modifiers that decrease this, you will hit a floor of 1 distance, and that is a lot easier to hit if you have 5 of these Pound Lock canals. So this is the canal. This is very much the idea. We will get started on these right away, doing a 5 drop, starting to head out towards the coast this way. If we take a look at our control, we should be able to see we're starting to get hundreds in a few places, but once we finish these canals, that 100 or the kind of higher numbers will start to spread over into this area. 50-year update here. Here's our maritime presence, and here's how it's related to control. We can see that Siosam is now connecting to Inju via this bay, which is why they are able to get 100 control there. Increasingly, we're going to see that on the entirety of the west coast. Also related to control is, I think, an important play pattern, which is that we have released several subjects. That's because we can't really propagate control out there, but they can, and so this allows us to get some usage out of this territory by having these subjects a little bit far away. Also coming into literacy, we have a bunch of things that are adding to literacy, and we currently have the highest in the world as far as we know it, beating out everyone by quite a nice margin in the places where we have upgraded settlements to towns. This is also our level of development. We are doing very, very well in the capital, but we've been encouraging development in this capital province the entire time, and it does have some key locations that we are going to use to connect these canals, and development helps to propagate control, because every percentage of development is going to decrease the distance needed for the capital. But also, just wanted to note how interestingly the development map mode lines up very, very neatly with the topography map mode, because that is a negative drain on development. So you do see that very strong correlation there. There are a couple of inflection points in the market for us here. First of all, it is difficult for us to collapse the price of wood. The burghers will import it to base price, but the more advanced goods, which we have started to dabble into in order to build these higher tier buildings, they do require wood, and so it is harder for us to get wood cheap in the economy as much as we're trying to do it, and so we might just have to tolerate buying stuff at base price for wood. We also see manufactured goods reaching kind of the higher level here in our trades list in both porcelain and lacquerware, which we can produce, which is something that's unique to the East. I don't know who all can produce it, but we also see that we're getting under 1 gold per trade power on some of our lower tier trades, and so we are going to be having a shift where we are starting to develop and earn a little bit less from trade. You can see we are getting around 500 from trade, the income less the expense, and a little bit more from taxes, although still mainly from trade. We are getting around 230 from taxes here. Also, a point we wanted to make is that the place where we had 55 market access at the start of the video, or 53, as a result of all of our reductions in proximity, now it has more market access. It's up to 69%, and so it is more profitable to build outward. Since we are switching to being more manufacturing minded here, it's worth pointing out something we've been playing around this entire time, which is that there are negative modifiers due to market access, but there's also positive modifiers, and one that we kind of wanted to point out is that there is vertical integration. By having iron, which is an input for tools, here in this location, we get plus 10% production, and we also have 4 levels in the building, so there's economies of scale. So even though we have this negative market access modifier due to the loud car outside, we are still producing 4 tools with a level 4 tools guild here in this province location. We won't be able to show it here because we can only show the Age of Renaissance, but it is noteworthy that you can unlock higher tier buildings, which will allow you to specialize in goods and allow you to export the particular things and import from people who are getting different ones. And they're not all in one tech tree like administrative or diplo. For example, the military tree does have the gun workshop here in the Age of Reformations. We discover the New World. Not trying to cover war here, but Ming Coalition CBs us, but they're going to have a real hard time landing us, and the only thing they can take is this peninsula, because good luck at getting access through Great Yuan. We span Confucian academies in most places, going to be nice for that pop promotion speed, and also getting max literacy for burghers, which will help with both trading and development. Alright, let's talk about something a little bit more complicated. We have this gold here. It has roughly the same amount of supply and demand. However, the gold price is at minus 33%. That is because effective supply and effective demand give extra weight towards the supply and the demand that are happening in the market and discount the stuff that's happening from trade. Since most of our demand is exports, we are getting effectively more supply than demand, which is decreasing the price here. Now, this is actually pretty good for us because we are extracting most of our value through trade, so a lower gold price means that each trade is going to be more valuable because we get the differential between the two. However, if we increase the price of gold, it's not the case that the money is lost. The gold is still being sold locally and adding to the local tax base, and so instead we could extract it through the estates, and the estates can get some money to spend, which is all well and fine for us. This is going to be the case that getting a higher gold price is going to get better as the car gets louder outside, but it's also going to get better as you start to get more control over areas, which we are experiencing because control decreases tax base, but it does not decrease the value you get from trade, unlike market access, which decreases both. And so we're entering a phase where spiking the price of gold higher isn't going to really have that much negative value for us. At the same time, we are also entering a phase where wood is expensive, expanding the gold is expensive, and we can't expand the gold anymore. Which brings us to jewelry. Now, jewelry costs gold to make. So if we produce jewelry, what will end up happening is beyond just their PM being valuable in itself, what will happen is we will decrease the price of jewelry and we will increase the price of gold, which will be good if we want to export jewelry just as much as gold. Well, jewelry has a base price of 5, gold has a base price of 10, but jewelry costs half as much to transport, so it's a bit of a wash in terms of which one you want to send out. And so then the question is do we want to just turn gold into jewelry? And the answer is, even if the margin by which the jeweler is just as profitable as another building, like let's say a tool maker, the value we get from pushing up the price of gold, since its base values are higher, is going to be larger than, in terms of stimulating our market and adding to the tax base, is going to be larger than other goods, say the tool maker, in terms of their inputs, if the total value of their inputs is going to be lower. So iron has a base price of 3. In terms of the tools, we see that 0.8 iron is used, so a total of 2.4 worth of value gets stimulated when we create those extra buy orders within our own market in terms of adding to the tax base. If we look at the jeweler, base price of 10, we're going to see gold is going to add 4 worth of stimulation to our tax base when we increase the price of it. Beyond that, we also have the additional enhancements we can add on. And so we can produce more value for our tax base even if the building is just as profitable as other buildings, and we can also extract just as much through trade because we can trade jewelry just as effectively as gold. And at the same time, I'm pretty sure this has negative effects for other countries because by decreasing the gold supply, we deny them profitable opportunities to turn gold into jewelry themselves and try and export it. This, of course, would be great for us because it would give us more opportunities for profitable export, but I'm a little bit less sure about the downstream effects. The entire point of highlighting this isn't to explain our strategy here, but it's to express that there are complex ideas that can be expressed through the economics here in EU5, even though we're just kind of going through a relatively simple plan here of increasing control. Yeah, we will add a bunch more jewelers to the queue though. So the transportation segment that started at 30, then was 7, is now down to 1.3, so we are able to get quite connected to the capital, to this little peninsula here. In terms of control, we are up to an equilibrium of 82. Now that this is also a core, you see that it is applying plus 20, and so that can connect pretty well. But it is connecting to a different market, which is kind of another thing to think about, and so the connection to the market is a respectable 75% as well here, and so the economic activity is happening here, we're getting relatively well compensated for. We finally get Yangming Cheng in the north here upgrading to a town, which is going to be a critical piece of infrastructure with 100% harbor capacity for connecting the rest of the north up here to the rest of our nation for control. I mean, you can't not take Beijing, so So, prices update. Gold is up from minus 33% to minus 23%, and jewelry, we have to scroll all the way to the top here of the very lowest low, is down from minus 29% to minus 40%. If we look at the way that this affects the trade routes, which to be fair, we have a confounding variable, we added way more trade routes, we have way less gold at the top of the scrum here, so we're not exporting gold to other people, so they are not able to do as many of the PMs that require gold, and we are starting to export quite a bit of jewelry in here. We have 115 total sell orders of jewelry. About 100 of those are exports and the rest is our own local consumption. Towards the bottom, we were actually having higher trades profit at the marginal level, at the very least profitable one, which is why we added a whole bunch of trade. So trade overall seems relatively the same in value, a little bit more flat, a little bit less polarized with really high ones and really low ones, but that wasn't the point. We expected this. What the idea is that hopefully we've increased our tax base by a large amount by increasing the price of gold and making it more profitable. Of course, we would need to test a little bit more and look at stuff a little bit more closely to know for sure, but the idea is I think what we expected is being seen right here. So we hit an important inflection point here where we have 100 maritime presence all throughout the bay in here, and our trade ships are starting to propagate control on the east coast of the peninsula. Coming back to the canal we're building, we're not quite done with all the levels here, but it's looking like some of the segments are going to have a ton to overcome from the proximity. Remember, some of these sea zones we're going through are 1 to 2 cost, but this plus 25, since it's additive with discounts and having to incur it on both the forest and the hills, this might be too much to overcome, and we might end up spreading the control not through our canal, but rather through this maritime presence here. So we have a rural cathedral, much like a temple, which increases max control. It, however, can only be applied to rural areas, so no towns or cities, and we put a bunch down in areas that we know we want to keep rural. And so this is an interesting kind of play pattern where a lot of the places we want to keep rural are going to be the ones with really good resources, like the pepper and the gold, and also places that have bad terrain, like the mountains here. Another interesting building like this is the Market Village. It can only be built in rural areas. You see the requirement here. And this is a Swiss Army knife of buildings. It gives you plausible laborers, which smooths out resource expansions, which need laborers. That way there's going to be 100 ready and willing. It gives you some trade advantage and capacity. And also, it gives you a bunch of different production methods that produce a bunch of different stuff. Pottery, jewelry, weaponry, beer, glass, and tools. And so they're very modular. And we have these again in all the areas where we know that we want to have not expanding as a result of, generally speaking, good resources. We see gold and pepper here are among them. We get our first core across the bay in Weihai, and it's going to have a maximum of 100 controls. So this area, this little peninsula across the bay, 100 control on that. So up in the north, we're starting to get a little bit of a colony situation. However, they functionally have zero access to the market down here in Akita. So I think we're going to make our own market right here because this place has a pretty good harbor suitability. And this will also give us a little bit of leverage over the area. The area is in the Arctic in terms of the terrain, so it's really not going to be worth a lot at any point in time, but we're going to make a new market there. Okay, I mean, it's not much with a market value of 2, but it'll grow. So unfortunately, the last 2 segments of our canal, Hoiyang and Tongxian, are not the most efficient ways to travel, despite, those having a canal system. Just traveling with one through this mountain is a little bit more efficient. So a little bit unfortunate, but we still do have the canal system out to here, which is helping us get over to here a bit faster. This is probably the last major improvement we will be able to make to proximity, other than these on the coast here should get more proximity as a result of going through the ocean. And if we use the proximity map mode, you can see how they are traveling around in order to get there, even if they're on the full right side. And so we're expecting to see more of that, and this is kind of the last vestige of a place that's not traveling through there. It's interesting to see how they do use the canal system a little bit. I'm pretty sure we could put a canal system through here in the middle so we could get a little bit more access here. I don't know if we have a river through here, but this is kind of the level to which we've been able to propagate control, at least for this age, until we get new technologies that are going to make it better, and then we could start looking more outward, which we've already been doing, but we just haven't been commenting on it too much. If we kind of look through here, we we can see that we do have a nice string of area that we will have maritime presence through at some point in time, and really be able to dominate trade there. And this sort of brings us to a larger point I wanted to make about EU5 economics, which is that I think it's phasic in nature. What is really important changes over the course of time. You know, for us at this outset here, expanding our RGOs all the way, getting control as much as possible, even releasing subjects so that they can have a bit of control for you, and then also urbanizing as much as possible so that you have these urban buildings to be able to keep stuff queued up in. All of this is really important. But what's important changes over time, and in particular, the discovery of the New World provides one of the best examples of what I mean by this. Is when you discover the New World, you get a whole bunch of new goods, and the first time your pops taste these goods, then this creates demand for the goods. So then these will be extremely expensive. So that means if you can trade for them, or move the trade, or control the trade for them, it's immensely profitable. So now you send your traders out, and you look to get what's called trade power in the region. And I do believe we have a kind of contested region in Huangzhou if we take a look at the trade power here. And we can see that we have 115 trade power and they have 111. Whoever has the biggest trade advantage, rather than power, these are the ones who control all the trades first. So they resolve all their trades, prices are recalculated, and then the next person goes. And so if you can be first in these really lucrative trade opportunities, then this becomes extremely important. And so gaining trade advantage through bullying people, colonizing, and using maritime presence, this is something you can do. And this changes in terms of what's important. However, this isn't the only way you can play or the only way you can deviate, because in order to go the colonization route, we have to play Age of Discovery in the Diplo tree. And what's notable about the Diplo tree is it really doesn't have a whole lot of manufactories in it. In order to get manufactories in this next age coming in, we have to play the administrative kind of area pretty deep. Notably, there's paved roads. And so if you wanted to play something more centralized and internal, you could do that. And we have these manufactories here for paper, or these workshops, paper workshops, naval supplies workshops, weapon workshops, these types of things. And okay, you could do both, but remember, you can only research 50 to 75% of all techs within a given period of time, so then you'll really be dumping military. So you have to make choices about what's going to be important and then play to your strengths in that way, and the economies will change based on how you make your choices. Here's our literacy map mode. Here's our development map mode, with our best province being 71. In terms of income, we are making around 600 in taxes and 1,000 in trade, less our trade expense. The reason our economy is doing booty is because we misclicked an event and accidentally took a $56,000 loan. Now, towards the beginning of the video, we took a look at the tooling workshop in Jinju, notably suffering from market access. It was around 0.53%, let's call it 0.5, and then also it only had about 20 control. Now it has 58% control. So in terms of how many goods it was producing, it went from producing around half the goods it can because of market access to 65%, which represents roughly a 30% increase, or a 25% because it was 53%. And in terms of tax base that it was added to, we have to multiply it by the level of control, and so 0.5 times 0.2 is around 10% of the values going to the tax base, and now we can round a little and call it 0.6 times 0.6, and so roughly 36% is going to the tax base, which represents a 260% increase in terms of tax base, which is kind of the overall trajectory that we experienced during this time frame as it relates to kind of this location that is out here on the edge. Of course, we acquired max control much earlier in the central area where we started urbanizing and producing first. Well, that's it. I was trying to be as information dense as possible. Hopefully I succeeded, while focusing on specifically economics and specifically control, which I think is a pretty sharp deviation from EU4 in EU5, and so I wanted to talk about that, constraints being, of course, time. I'll probably have to go back and re-record my rather lengthy intro that I had already recorded, but I did want to comment on a couple things before I went. The first of all is I'm probably going to be doing more EU5 content. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments, and if there's enough questions, we will do a Q&A video. And then secondly, I just wanted to comment on the price collapsing kind of metagame slash mechanic, and I have mixed feelings on this. I think it's fine from a gameplay perspective, but from the perspective of a simulation, the government locking in super low prices for like 30 things all at once, I think doesn't quite make sense, but I don't really see a good solution for it. This is something I left feedback on, but I do have like mixed feelings on that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to do the YouTube algorithm thing, like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, and other than that, have a happy Thursday.